being about a proposed scope amendment to the McLean-Langley High School boundary. And we'll first hear from our staff members, Mr. Plattenberg and Ms. Gillis. So again, goal here is to go to just about after 1:30. But Dr. Brabrand, do you have a comment?
Just a moment before Ms. Gillis and Mr. Plattenberg speak. Ms. Marin, you did an outstanding job of referencing to the board just a few minutes ago. What we're bringing to you today around scoping, the request to enlarge the scoping, is very similar to something we just did with the board just a few weeks ago around Glen Forest. And this is the opportunity with McLean and Langley to go back and go beyond just looking at the high school boundary, because we heard from the community a need to take a look at the middle school piece as well. So it's very similar to what we were doing just a few weeks ago. Mr. Plattenberg and Ms. Gillis can give you the details, but I just wanted to frame that for the board as you're reviewing this consideration. Thank you. Mr. Plattenberg?
Really, you said it best, Dr. Brabrand, and I'd like to kick it back to you. I know the magisterial member has things to say about it as well. Thank you. So,
Oh, was that to Elaine then? That's to Ms. Tolan. That magisterial member, yes.
be up for you to say that. That's why I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize. I was trying to be as concise as I could possibly be, and apparently that was too concise. Yeah. Sorry.
So, Ms. Tolan, you're going to speak first, and then did you want to share a presentation, or Ms. Tolan, you're just going to speak?
I think I can handle it.
You're on.
The first thing I'd like to do is thank, we have members of the McLean community here in the audience that have sat here patiently, for a long time, waiting for us to get to this topic. So thank you very much for being here. Yes, we held meetings around the Langley McLean High School boundary change in December. And since that time, I've had some communication with the community. We've got our website where we've gathered comments. And predominantly the comments that we have received from the community was that we needed to broaden the scope of the boundary change from just including the high schools to including the feeder middle schools, Cooper and Longfellow. Some of the other types of comments that we heard that we'll be discussing with the community further and we'll bring back to you is that we need to look at, of course, grandfathering, the timing of this. We have had a lot of people express the fact that we're getting very close to fall 2020, and originally we had talked about potentially doing it at that point in time. But with the high school kids having signed up for all of their classes, at this point, principals hiring staff, et cetera, fall 2020 seems pretty quick. But we do need to move forward, as we do have a real overcrowding issue at McLean High School that needs to be addressed in a multiple set of ways, including this boundary study. I'm hoping that after today, this will be a step in the right direction, and that we can move forward, and that we can increase our communication back to the community. They've been patiently waiting since our December meetings for some further direction here. And after today, we'll be able to work with staff to set up subsequent meetings to get more community input and move forward to make some decisions as to what will be happening and exactly when it will be happening. Give closer look to some of the other options that we need to relieve the capacity issues at McLean High School, such as looking into a modular. We were looking at scoping bathrooms across the county to look for renovations, et cetera. But our next step that we need to do today, what we need to do is okay to concur. The board just needs to concur that we could include Cooper and Longfellow, the two feeder middle schools to McLean High School and to Langley High School, in the boundary study. And I have been assured from staff that the fact that Cooper is about to go under renovation is something that we'll have to think about, but that doesn't need to slow this process. So if there are any questions.
Okay, so, and just to confirm, again, we are focused on concurring or not, that we can include two middle schools in the boundary study. That is the breadth of this discussion today. So, Mr. Frisch, maybe first, followed by Ms. Cohen.
Thank you. I want to thank Elaine for bringing this forward. I know that Elaine, Melanie and I were, as well as our at-large members, were at the conversations in the community at Langley and McLean in December when all of us, save for Karen, were not yet members of the school board. But listening to these conversations, this is one of the things that bubbled up. And that's how this process should work. Going into the community and having these conversations to hear from them things that we may not be seeing. And so I'm eager to move this forward. I'm grateful that School Board Member Tolan has done such an admirable job of communicating with the families that will be impacted by these decisions, and also keeping the rest of this board up to date as well. I have many students who go to McLean High School, and I've enjoyed working with Ms. Tolan on these issues. Thank you.
Ms. Cohen.
I just want to second the idea that I'd like that we're looking at things more holistically. I know that Ms. Tolan has been really invested in her community and making herself available in any number of ways for these conversations. And it shows we actually had a member of her community at our FPAC meeting this past week who came to advocate for exactly this. His child is in a split feeder elementary school, and if we are only looking at McLean Langley, what it would mean is their child would go to a split feeder, would go to a different middle school than most of their classmates, and then would go to a different high school than most of their middle school classmates. So I think this is great. He was very supportive of the idea of expanding the scope. I think I can speak, we have two of our FPAC actually members in the audience today. So I feel like I can speak on behalf of FPAC to say we are hugely supportive of the idea that when we look at something, we're not just pushing one domino to the next and creating a larger problem. The idea that we're able to look a little bit further down and help parents only have to make this decision one time as they look in the future of their kids. I think it's awesome. So very supportive.
Thank you. Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
I too am supportive. I do want to just give you an opportunity to explain. I believe there are there other middle schools included in your area that could also be impacted, and how, if those exist, how they are not included? There's no one else?
Yeah, we have Cooper feeds Langley and Longfellow feeds McLean. So it's pretty clean.
Okay.
Okay, and Ms. McLaughlin.
I just want to say I very much support this, and maybe it goes without saying, but one of the ways that we help the public that can get anxious about any boundary scoping and potential boundary changes is having the authoritative voice of the superintendent and his experts talking about why one approach may be better than the other. So I just want to make sure that the public realizes that the board is taking a very mindful approach to this, that we'll be working with FCPS staff. Public engagement and public input's important, but when we're making operational changes, it absolutely has to be rooted in objective decision-making, and that, I think, helps take the board out of the pressures of which I don't want the perception that people think it's whatever's the loudest voice is how we'll get to any outcome. I know that's not how we lead, but I want to be helpful, especially to Ms. Tolan, because I know this is a highly engaged community. And in my time on the board that we've been talking about this, I haven't necessarily heard everybody in unison from the community. So I just want to allay people's fears that we're going to be very holistic in this review. So thank you, Elaine, for your hard work on this.
Ms. Darna Koufax.
Yes, Ms. Tolan, you mentioned that we had originally hoped to have this done by the start of the school year this year, and we talked about the overcrowding at McLean. Have any modifications been done to McLean campus, like any trailers or modulars or anything put there right now? No. Okay. Thank you.
The only modifications we've done is working with the principal, taking out some lockers and some overcrowded entryways and access ways, and looking at egress currently. That's all we've currently done.
All right. So then with that, what is the anticipated time frame? Like, what's your, When do you anticipate that if the board gives you approval to increase the scoping?
Well,
what
we're going to
we
have to
looking
take a look at that because certainly it's in conflict with what Ms. Tolan had mentioned as well. It's a very good question, Ms. Fairfax, because the conflict of, the staffing that's going on, the student course selection that's already going on. So really it would something we'll develop a communication plan working with OCCR to make sure that we can go ahead and get on it as soon as possible because these problems aren't going away. And I don't know exactly what that time frame exactly looks at right now, given the time of the calendar of the year and our previous conversations. So I don't have that really in mind.
Mr. Planberg, would it be helpful, though, to say, we'll work on the timeline, we would not be doing a boundary change to impact next school year? Is that correct? But we would continue to engage the community because when we went out in the first, if we're going to solve this problem, we want to go larger than just the 2 high schools. There's a middle school piece that Ms. Cohen already spoke to. We don't want to flip-flop back between pyramids. So solve it together. But to do that, we need permission from the board. It was broader than the original scope that we brought you before. We can solve that, come up with a plan, and I'm hopeful that we'd be able to have a plan that would be able to impact not this school year, but the 21-22 school year. Is that correct, Mr. Planberg? But the internal timeline about when the next meeting is, when we'll have all the options before the board, we don't have that down to a specific date yet.
Okay, and I guess what will also help is we will have the consultant's report on best practices and boundaries, so we can utilize some of that. And I also, what you're mentioning in this particular one, and I think that's one of the bigger questions when we talk about boundaries. Obviously, we're dealing with, you said the middle school, it's a split feeder, and cross pyramids, and what we think about that as a board, what we want to do as a community, how community feels that, and what best practices are. So I think that time frame probably seems as though it's better overall. Thank you.
Okay, so can we get a show of hands, please, of who can support to expand the scope of the Mount McLean Langley boundary study to include the middle school feeders? That is unanimous. I will turn it over to Ms. Corbett Sanders.
Excellent. And Ms. Merritt, I want to thank you for managing the work session so well. I appreciate that. I do want to just kind of set the agenda for the rest of the afternoon. We will adjourn here, and we will go up to have lunch in room 4050. We'll have a break from 1:30 to 2 o'clock, and at 2 o'clock we will begin our retreat. I am going to ask people to please bring with them the laminated sheets in front of you, because we're going to start the retreat with just a brief review of that. Excellent. And so with that, we are not coming back to this room, so this work session is adjourned.
And Ms. Corbett Sanders, for staff, what time will we be beginning the retreat aspect? So I can inform